This is K.M. Weiland, and you're listening to the 293rd episode of the Helping Writers Become Authors podcast. It's my pleasure to announce to all of you who have been waiting for it that my ebook, Conquering Writer's Block and Summoning Inspiration, is now available on audiobook, narrated once again by the amazing Sonia Field. You may remember that I originally released this information as an audio presentation years ago. I completely updated and expanded it by nearly 50% when I re-released it as an ebook last winter. So this new audiobook version contains all the new and additional information. You can grab it off Amazon.com. And if you're not an Audible member yet, you can even grab it for free by signing up. The latest post in the video series on my blog is, Want an unforgettable protagonist? Your minor characters are the secret. It explains one of the reasons Deputy Barney Fife was such a great character, and that was because of the other minor characters on the show, and how you can use your minor characters to make your protagonist even more amazing. To find the post, visit my site at helpingwritersbecomeauthors.com. And now, I hope you'll enjoy this week's podcast, entitled How the Perfect Midpoint Moves Your Protagonist from Reaction to Action, or Why I'm Thankful for Marvel. I have to thank the Marvel movies for a lot of things, like my Captain America shield pillow, my Iron Man socks, my Spider-Man poster, my Hulk thumb wrestler. Okay, where was I? Oh yes, talking about being a writer, not a fangirl. One other, slightly more important thing, for which I have to thank the Marvel movies, is the light bulb that went off in my head while sitting in the dark theater, center row, center seat, last April when watching Captain America, the Winter Soldier. It was a light bulb that did a fine job of illuminating the sticky question of how to shift your protagonist from reaction in the first half of your story to action in the second half, using your story's midpoint. And for that light bulb, let us return to our regularly scheduled Marvel example. So there I was, sitting in the theater, licking popcorn salt off my lips, immersed in the Winter Soldier. Story technique was actually the farthest thing from my mind at that point, but then something happened. The story's midpoint happened, and right before my eyes, I actually saw the protagonist's subtle mental shift from reaction to action. So what does reaction look like in the first half of your story? The protagonist is going to spend the first half of the story feeling pretty off balance. He doesn't completely understand what's going on, why it's happening, or why it keeps getting in the way of his own personal goals. He may not even yet completely understand what it is he wants, although he definitely wants something. If you're Steve Rogers, aka Captain America, you want to protect the values you believe in and use your rather elite skill set in a meaningful way. You don't want to be a stooge for a homebrewed commie organization. You know bad things are going down in S.H.I.E.L.D., but you don't know why or who's behind them. You have no idea who to trust, especially after you're branded a fugitive and have to go on the run. When a character is in his confused reaction period, he's going to spend most of his time with a concerned and wrinkled forehead. He's going to walk around looking just a bit baffled as he struggles to keep up with the conflict and sort things out. But then the midpoint happens, and along with it, the moment of truth. This is where everything changes for the protagonist. This all-important turning point in the second act provides him with a new understanding of the conflict, the antagonistic force, and his own goals in relation to them. Suddenly he gets it. If you're Cap, then you suddenly learn from an old enemy reincarnated as a supercomputer that the all-American organization you've been working for is actually the evil Hydra group you started out fighting way back in World War II. It's not a happy revelation, but suddenly everything starts to make way more sense. So at the moment of truth, a new light suddenly dawns in the protagonist's eyes. You can practically see the gears whirring and clicking in his head. All the clues he's picked up in the first half suddenly fall into place. His eyes might get wide, his mouth might fall open. He's shocked, sure, but he's not bewildered anymore. So after the midpoint, the character is suddenly armed with enough information to allow him to start fighting back. He doesn't have to continue merely shielding himself from the antagonistic force's assault. Now he understands how to start picking up some of those rocks and start chucking them back. He will still probably be at a significant disadvantage in the conflict, but thanks to the moment of truth, he now has enough inside information to see the chink in his opponent's armor and take advantage of it. If you're Cap, then you may look pretty happy for a guy who found out he died for nothing. A huge burden has been lifted from your shoulders because you just like to know who you're fighting. And from there on, you do start fighting. You grab what you just learned and you put it to work by taking the battle directly to the antagonist's doorstep. In the second half of the story, the protagonist is going to get his game face on. No more confusion, no more realization, just determination. He knows where he's going and how to get what he wants, although he's sure to run into some new developments. But nobody better get in his way. In other words, cue the hero face. So it was actually while watching Winter Soldier that I first realized this shift from reaction to action is actually visible in the protagonist's face. And this is a particularly great example because you also have the fact that Cap is running away from the bad guys in the first half and running toward them in the second half. Since then, I've spent the last year observing this phenomenon again and again in movie after movie. Take a look at some of your favorite movies, Marvel or not. Observe how the protagonist will be straining his brain to comprehend the conflict in the first half. Then watch the light dawn in his eyes at the midpoint. And then take a look at how he shifts into determined and enlightened action in the second half. The exact same principle should hold true in your books. Obviously, the visual shift in your protagonist's expressions won't be obvious to readers, but your readers should still be seeing the exact same attitudes in your characters' thoughts, dialogue, and action. As long as your story's midpoint is properly facilitating this all-important shift in the middle of your story, your conflict is sure to progress in a powerful and resonant way. Thank you for listening to the Wordplay Podcast. To read a transcript of this episode, you can visit my website at helpingwritersbecomeauthors.com. And be sure to check back again next week.